Hello, everyone. I'm just changing out or not changing out, putting in the Pikachu, or not the Pokemon for this particular broadcast. Let me make him look like he's looking up at you there. Hello and welcome. My name is Shone, and I'm here to share a perspective. And I say perspective now because this is my, you could say, knowledge or information that's turning into, perhaps you might want to reframe it as the word a theory. However, I think there's a considerable amount of evidence out there to support this. And so, what I wanted to share with you today is what I believe is happening in the world right now. And when I say believe, I mean I hold an opinion. It's very important that we recognize that how we use words can sometimes project on others. And so I'm very cognizant of when I use certain words, how I use them. And although I'm still Homo sapien, I may, of course, make an error on the way I say them. I wanted to purposely point all that out because this is just how I'm seeing things based on my perspective, based on my intel or information that I receive. And so I thought I wanted to, in this video journal series, to be a lot more about the things that I think about. And because a lot of times I've listened to videos of essentially from other people and they're talking about what they think about. Sometimes they're channeling or they're giving a reading or they're telling us something that they find exciting. But a lot of times that those different bits of information can spark something within me. And of course, I've had a lot of those ideas float through my head. I've always had them. I've always saw more, perhaps you can say, the answer to what was happening. So some random person would go, well, why did so and so happen in the politics? And then suddenly I'd have this whole little story in my head about how it all happened. And yeah, so I kind of wanted to share with you, and I'll give like sources, I guess. Sources meaning like source of the information, not source as in capital S, when I can. But of course, I'm not here trying to share everyone else's information. I'm more so wanting to share the little bits that come into my field and those pieces or fragments that I've compiled together and perhaps share. And you know, so anyways, let's go with it. So what's happening in the world? What I see is that I'm very aware that there have been major civilizations in the past. And those civilizations may have included the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Tartarian Empire, the most recent American Empire, and the Atlantean Empire. Maybe Atlantean Empire wasn't the right word because apparently Atlantis and Lemuria existed together on opposite sides. But the point being is the Sumerian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Persian Empire maybe too. See, what I'm pointing at is throughout our history, we've always had empires, and these empires have come and gone. And so where I want to start this off is I believe that the American empire, which was global, is coming to an end. And it was once the power of the world, just as the British Empire used to be the power of the world, and the Roman Empire was the power of the world. It's almost like these empires are traded, or not traded, but they exchange, they move around. Yeah, there we go. So that, firstly, that's what I believe is happening, and I believe that we're witnessing that. Now, a lot of the Christian, or not Christian, but we'll say religious people, believe that Armageddon and, end times and all these catastrophic things, they're believing that is coming. that there is some sort of giant grand reset. And essentially, the end of the American empire, we'll call it, is definitely part of that. However, I think most importantly is I see this as a transition to something considerably better. See, the news and the media and whatever it is else out there, they would prefer everyone to be completely programmed to their entertained. Yeah, entertained. You should definitely look up what the word entertain actually means. But they truly wish for us to be entertained, and so that we're not necessarily witnessing what's happening outside. And back in the old days, they would have the theaters, and the whole town could be burning down, but inside of the theater, which was so noisy, and everyone's laughing, and like the whole world could be burning down around them, but they'd still be sitting there entertained by the theater production with the alcohol and such. I don't know where all that came from, but yeah, it's like, but nonetheless, is that we're all entertained. So they would prefer that we stay there and we continue doing that. And a lot of the stuff I see on media, for example, to me that seems to be distractions, getting us to look over there. Well, what's actually happening is over here, and what's actually happening is they've lost their they've lost all their money. And that's one of the biggest reasons why they're crumbling, is because there used to be systems in place that required large amounts of money to be used in order to control through greed, essentially. Like, that's why I mentioned that video yesterday with Travave, is because he was actually including disclosing what he did about the different countries, the different operatives and such. He also mentioned the actual sums of money that they required in funding from wherever they got it from in order to pay all these operatives and all these traders, as he mentioned them to be. So back to what I was saying. So what is happening, and that's included as well, is that we are transforming as a species, as a society, a civilization. And essentially the controlling forces that used to control us, they are quickly losing power. Quickly as in right now. But this has been an ongoing thing for many, many, many years. Many years. And so we're coming to the precipice, like right to the top of that change. There are different organizations out there that are already establishing or have established themselves for a transition. See, when I say the fall of the American empire, that simply means the fall of that type of structure. And that structure included a lot of different things. It included a certain way of governing people, giving them the illusion that the people themselves were governing themselves. So essentially they can control through, maybe it's proxier, but anyways. And then there was other governments in the world that controlled by sheer dictatorships and communism and fascism and such. But all of those styles of control and styles of being controlled, because it's also, a lot of people felt, maybe they do feel, that it's easier to have someone else do a lot of the things for you. And that comes back into programs and such. We were given a program called the Saviour program, and that got us or encouraged us to always look outside for someone to come save us. They'd often have in movies and such that, certain things were happening, and then it's like, oh, he's coming to save us. And then everyone's cheering, and, you go from screaming in the streets to all like clapping and heroing because someone came and saved us. And so I also believe, in a sense, then that's what a lot of people are waiting for, is they're waiting for someone to come and save us from the outside. And that's what I see is happening now, that they're creating certain situations where we then look to the governments, or we look to the old systems, the old organizations, in order to come and fix the problem. When in fact, who fixes the problem are the people who are there. And once again, there's darkness again giving normal people the opportunity to have that experience of immense growth. Sometimes when we see things like storms and such and great fires, and we feel, oh, bad for them, it's unfortunate that they're having to go through this, we don't necessarily see or we may not necessarily see the great personal growth that these people have essentially come into. And so what I'm seeing right now is, as I said, I'm seeing the end or the fall of one, but with the fall of one, there is a rise of another. And that's what I also do believe. I do believe that people are becoming stronger, essentially, and reuniting with perhaps who they truly are. I mentioned in a previous video where a guy was looking over or reacting to a lot of these other people's videos, and you could definitely see that things are changing, and they are changing for the better, for the extremely better. And that's the same thing that's happening in Africa. I have never been there. I've only known people there, and of course I've heard the programming and stuff that I got from school and such. But lately, I've had the opportunity to see news broadcasts from the Field Messengers and from United News Network, and they actually are showing videos of Africa from African people. And so I've got a much better understanding of Africa. Like, even one little bit of information I once and I often talk about is that, from what I understand, before all that bombing in Iran, the city of Tehran, for example, was just as advanced as New York City in the 1970s. So it takes away this idea that some of these areas are just sandy and such. So arriving all the way back at what I think is happening. And believe, because I gotta use my words right. What I believe is happening is I believe we are going through an ascension process. And what I mean by that is that we are going through an evolutionary phase of humanity. For a very, very long time, they've been trying to hold back the evolution of humanity. And the evolution is seen in a more of a psychic abilities, meaning things such as being able to communicate with thought, being able to communicate over long distances without cell phones, to being able to, well, some people are able to move things with their mind. And there's been a lot of research about this. Like, I even went to Science World one time, I guess about 2 years ago, and they had a science machine where it was set up, like really specific commands, but they had a device that connected to your head, and you could think things and move things in this setup they had. So the thoughts forward, back, and all that stuff, that somehow that they were able to. Now, yes, they could have just scanned the brain, and then if those different areas light up, then move the ball that way. Nonetheless, they had the ability to actually use our mind to move things. And so I believe, as part of this process, that we're going to begin doing a lot more of that. We're going to, more importantly, be moving back to who we are as Homo sapiens. And the word Homo sapiens was something that I had learned about when I was in school. when I was in school, maybe grade 3, 4, or whatever, they taught us about Homo sapiens as being the name for what human is. And they made the association that human and Homo sapien were the exact same thing. I've come to learn that that's not necessarily, or that's untrue. Nonetheless, we'll talk about that later. So you'll hear me saying that we are going to be returning to being Homo sapiens, and with Homo sapiens having those powers that were bred out of us. And as I said, this has been a long time coming because we have slowly been getting more powerful the whole entire human since the maybe 1900s. And that's where Tartaria came in that it possibly was some sort of reset. And I'm not meaning Tartaria specifically, but the idea that there is some sort of civilization that has been erased from our modern world, exemplifying that there has been some sort of reset, so some sort of major effort in order to distort the message that came to Earth over 2016 years ago. And although that message has been maintained and distorted and maintained maybe, it's lasted. A lot of the very positive things about Christianity and about all religions, a lot of the very positive things that are loving and compassionate and all of the higher vibrational lessons and such have been held on this whole time. And so one of the other things that I feel is happening is, as Homo sapiens, as we return to being more Homo sapien, we return to those higher vibrational aspects of our nature. And we're not willing to trade our soul any longer for what they flaunt in front of us. We're not willing to drive and sacrifice. And I believe that's where we're going. And I think that's super, super important. In my own community and across Canada, when I drove, I found that there were a lot, and when I mean a lot, I mean almost all of the fast food restaurants and gas stations and other types of businesses, they were all employed by immigrants who had come to Canada believing that things were going to get a lot better. And I've talked to a lot of them, and no, it didn't get a lot better. When they came here, yes, sending money back to their own country, that allowed for them to, of course, in that country to get more. But the cost of living is expensive here. And so that they're working 2 and 3 jobs. And I've spoken to so many of them. That's not derogatory, I'm meaning immigrants. And they've told me what they're going through in order to be here. Funny enough, when I was, I guess, in 2 decades ago, I wrote a play. First it was a play, and then it turned into a movie script about how the Chinese were brought originally at the 1900s. They were brought over from Asia, and they were brought here to work. And the whole idea is they were sold this dream that they could go and send money back home. But just like the immigrants of today, they're experiencing there's no way to do that because the whole system was set up to raise the price in where you send the people. And so therefore there was no money to send back home. And not only that, having to work 2 and 3 jobs, that's just insane. Breaking everything down to mostly part-time and lacking full-time benefits. Some places do have full-time benefits, I understand, such as Starbucks. But anyways, I see all of that ending. I see that as we restore our, we'll call it powers, but our abilities, our natural abilities, and I myself have had lots of, guessing. It's not really guessing though, but knowing what people are thinking. And for instance, here's another example, going to grab the phone and then the person you were thinking about is phoning you. See, those are not coincidences. They are synchronicities. being able to feel what someone else is feeling when they're standing in front of you. And if they're angry and suddenly you're feeling that out of nowhere, that's you feeling their anger. So there's a lot of us who are going to have those feelings, like a mother's intuition, for instance. And actually, intuition is the name of that. They did give it a name, the sixth sense. It's just there's a knowingness that we're going to be returning to. And that is part of all of the good parts of the message from what is referred to as Jesus, is that we are going to regain those abilities as we're connected with God, and we're going to be able to heal one another, to heal ourselves, and we're not going to be limited. And so as we see the outside world, or what I started to refer to as the American Empire, as we see that empire fall, what's being given way is the return of all of this positiveness energy within ourselves. And it returns because these empires, and America being the last, and China was going to be the next empire that ruled the whole entire world. It's very easy to see that it was happening. But through those changes, we are going to be restored with who we are, because those empires had whole entire systems set up in order to limit us, in order to consume our energy, consume our time, trade our energy for time, and then trade it for pieces of paper, and then set us into a never-ending slavery system, having us think that we could be successful because we saw it on TV, so we continue to keep trying. But yet, night after night, things aren't happening the way that we would assume. And then they even put in a system where at the end of breaking out of that system, there would be another thing that would say, well, you create everything yourself. It's all your fault. Another blame system, another shame system. When the truth of it is there has always been a system that's working right on the edges of almost getting out, and it would mimic light. And then it would tell it why you needed to stay in a holding pattern, and that everything was your fault, and you needed to keep doing the same stuff over and over again for 20 years, and yet things still didn't seem to come through. So as that system falls apart, that system of control, which I needed to say his name a whole bunch of times, but as the African leader is mentioning, they're kicking that system out, and that system's being publicized around the world. And as we all start to ourselves kick that system out, that's the last thing that not the last thing, that's the next thing that I see, is that people are going to rise up to the occasion who never imagined being leaders. I often look at my UNN community as we're all a group of leaders, because leaders are people who are going to step up when they know what was happening and help share this information. And the ones that are on the ground running right now are going to have more information, and therefore they're going to have more of a job, per se, to go out there and share that information. So I hope you enjoyed. Now, that's just a little bit about what I see. I see a lot more, and I've mentioned it in other videos that I did on my previous series, different projects that I wanted to see. See, that's the interesting thing about spending so much time in imagination and pondering and wondering, is it's not necessarily that these are all my things that I will accomplish. They could be things that other people are accomplishing, or, well, I won't get too far down that rabbit hole, but I have a lot of other things that I would love to see, but this is what I think is happening right now, is we're just simply going through a transitional stage. The powers that be that remain, who think that they're still in charge, they're trying to do their normal, let's get people panicked and feared and let's let them think all these amazingly terrible things are happening. And then they'll make them happen because, they're Homo sapiens who are waking up with the ability to control their reality considerably more than they realize. And that's all they're trying to do is hold on to what they thought they had. When the real change, the real thing that's happening isn't Armageddon, it's not the end of the world, it's not the end of anything. It's the beginning of something new. For us. For them, yeah, it's the end of that. I see a world, and I'll finish with this. I see a world, as I mentioned, where everyone's giving to what they get. So everyone contributes into the community and everyone gives back, that there's no need to tax most things. Yeah, we might have to have, we have money. We might have to have a system where everyone's contributing to certain jobs that need to be done within the community. However, we don't necessarily need to tax. And I would love, and I foresee, and I explain it in my projects that I talk about, especially the marketplace one, where everyone can contribute equally to what is produced. So for instance, if a certain group of people have a farm, a certain city has a farm, then it's the people within that community that get all that comes from the farm. And if there is surplus and there's another town over that has less, then yeah, we can trade directly with them. We don't need to worry about long train sending things super far distances. There can be an economy set up for rare items in certain areas, kind of idea. But as for everyone who can grow an apple, grows their own apples locally. Every city should have an orchard if they can. And that's the one thing with technology now, and that's living with technology as opposed to having technology control us, is that technology can perhaps change things such as a biodome, for example, a structure with technology can make it so that we have an environment of whatever we need to grow here. And then we can be self-sustaining. And so I definitely see, as we move into this transition, not a fall to caveman area, rather a side movement into how we utilize technology so that we do not rely on or abuse nature. So moving oranges, for example, all over the world, or putting a boat on the ocean to send pineapples is abusing nature, in my opinion. When we just need, like, all the particles from the ship are going in there at the expense of the pineapples. So the pineapples really shouldn't be leaving Hawaii. Things like that. The gas and the fuel and all the man hours to move goods all over the place. Yes, there will be considerable jobs lost when we refrain from shipping so much. However, those jobs can be transferred into things that people want to do them anyways. They might not want to do what they're doing, and they're only doing it because of the money. There might be other reasons. So I see a lot of these amazing, beautiful things happening. I see a transition into something where we are more connected with nature, and I look forward to being a part of that. So I just wanted to share all that. I know that some of it might be controversial, but who knows? Let's do this world super, super great. And I totally look forward to being in that world. And I was super excited to start this. And thank you so much for sharing your time with me. All right. Have a good day.